because this way it's recognizable that you didn't just step into the sukkah for a moment. It's recognizable that you are coming to sit down in the sukkah to do a mitzvah. Obviously, if you sat down in the sukkah even to have a meeting, that's also a mitzvah. But obviously, when you sit down for a meal, that's more obvious. And as a result of that, if you're going in for that purpose, that's when you should be making the bracha. When a person is still standing, it's not recognizable, it's not obvious that you are kiveya, that you're setting yourself up now. You're going to set yourself up for a meal in the sukkah, and as a result of that, you're going to be making a bracha. And therefore, because it's possible you can walk into the sukkah and leave immediately. So it's only once you sit down in the sukkah for the meal, that's when you make the bracha. And we derive this again from a mashmois apasuk. It's not a clear directive in a pasuk, but we derive it from the expression that the pasuk uses, and the pasuk uses the expression Sukkos teishvu shivas yomim. It says Sukkos teishvu, you should sit in the sukkah. So from there we derive that once you've established that you're actually going to sit down, it's not just in and out. That's when you should make the bracha. Loshen tisakfu. Sitting means tisakfu. You're going to be staying there. You're not going to just be in and out. K'may the pasuk. As the pasuk says, that they stayed in Kodesh Yomim Rabim. So similarly, so over here, what it means, it has a similar definition, interpretation, that it means the pasuk seems to imply or teach us that the ikar mitzvah becomes when we recognize that something is done b'derech kavua in a set up way, as opposed to just an in and out kind of thing. So how do we do it? How do we go about it? So first of all, we go into the sukkah and we make the bracha hamaitzi. Obviously, you wash before. You make the bracha hamaitzi. So if you're not doing a hamaitzi, you're doing a mezainis. So you make the bracha of hamaitzi, or you make the bracha of mezainis. And only after that do we say the bracha leishiv basukkah. Why? Because the bracha leishiv basukkah tzricha leheyamer b'shas hasuda v'lekoydem la. Because as we said earlier, the teishfu is when you're sitting down, establishing a meal. That's when the bracha needs to be said. So once you make the hamaitzi, that's an indication that you have established yourself as participating in a meal. The birchas of hamaitzi, if you're eating bread or challah, or if it's a mezainis, when you make the bracha bein mezainis. So first you make the hamaitzi or the mezainis, and then you make the leishiv basukkah. So that's when you're eating a meal. There's a different situation, and that is the havdalah. What about when we make Havdalah? And we talked about it a few days ago. It was Matzah Shabbos, and we talked about making the Havdalah, and after the Havdalah to say the Leishiv Basukkah. There, just before you drink the wine, is when you make the bracha of Leishiv Basukkah. After you make the bracha of Hamavdil Mekedesh L'Chayil. And just before, you don't say Baruch Atah Hashem Be'er Piagofen and then say Leishiv Basukkah, but you say the next bracha, Hamavdil Mekedesh L'Chayil, and then you're just about to drink the wine. At that point, you say the Leishiv Basukkah, and again, because it needs to be done when you're, in this case, although it's the questionable thing whether you make the bracha on the Havdalah on the wine or not, but our custom is to make a bracha even on the wine of the Havdalah. And as a result of that, we wait until we're just about ready to drink the wine, and that's when we make the bracha of Leishiv Basukkah. Yeah, you don't have to sit down to make the Leishiv Basukkah, but it's right. I'm not sure if it says, I haven't seen it said, but You don't have to stand. As a matter of fact, I've seen mostly that actually people sit down, and that's when they make the Leisha Basuka. I don't know if it's brought down anywhere. No, because again, the concept of leishev here doesn't mean sitting. It means, as we just said, that you are staying there for a while. So it doesn't mean literally sitting in the sukkah. If a person doesn't sit, he's standing. There's no room to sit down, so you don't make a leishev basukkah. The leishev basukkah means that you're staying in the sukkah. Right. Can't say I can't. I need a chair, otherwise I can't make a leishev basukkah. Misha shachach levarich leishev basukkah b'tchilas hasuda. Here's another interesting halacha, and it comes up often. I've had it. I can almost say when you have a table with guests, it generally comes up during every meal that this question arises, and that is, you're in the middle of the meal, you're sitting, and all of a sudden you realize, I forgot to make the Leisha Basuka now. And I've already started eating. I heard Kiddush, I started eating, and what do we do? Do I make a Leisha Basuka then, or did I miss the opportunity? What's the deal? Somebody who forgot to say Leisha Basuka when he was supposed to at the beginning. And he reminds himself, he's in the middle of the meal, and he reminds himself that he has to make Leisha Basuka. So the halacha is, like with everything else, if you forgot to make a bracha, you're drinking a glass of water, and you forgot to make a bracha at the beginning, so when you remind yourself, you make a bracha. So what's the chiddush here? So the chiddush is the next piece. You finished his meal. Meal is over. It would be similar to you finished drinking and you forgot to make shakal niyah b'dvarei. So if you finish drinking and you forgot to make shakal niyah b'dvarei, there's no halacha that says make the shakal then. But over here, where we're supposed to make the leisha basuka at the beginning of the meal, and you forgot, and you're in the middle of the meal, and you still forgot, and you're at the end of the meal, you finished your meal, and now you're reminding yourself, I forgot to make leisha basuka. So even if you remind yourself it's after the meal already, you varich kishenisker, you make the bracha kishenisker when you remind yourself that you didn't make the bracha, because, and the reason is, because in this case, it's not just about eating in the sukkah that is a mitzvah. If that were the case, you finished eating, you can make a bracha, you missed it. But since the mitzvah is not just to eat in the sukkah, even sitting in a sukkah, even after the meal, that's also part of the mitzvah of yeshiva b'sukkah. Sitting around in the sukkah, anything that you do throughout the day, normally in your home, there's a mitzvah to do it in the sukkah. If you're having a conversation, you're having a meeting, do it in your sukkah. If you're learning, do it in your sukkah. Whatever it is that you would normally do in your home, it's a mitzvah to do it in the sukkah. So, although we don't make a bracha, just generally walking in, but nevertheless, the most important part, as we talked about earlier, is when you establish yourself that you're going to walk in and actually sit down and do something there. And that is when you sit down with a meal, because a meal is going to take a meal, whatever it's going to take. So, and that's the teishru. Pasuk is teishru, from which we derive that the bracha is made when there is the teishru, ke'intoturu, that it's established that you're going to spend some time there. So, but in spite of that, in this case, where you reminded yourself after you finished eating, and you're still going to be there, even sitting in the sukkah after the sukkah, that's also part of the mitzvah. And therefore, So from here we can derive that miyad la'achar habracha harayu oiver la'asiyason. It's still over la'asiyason because he made the bracha and he's still sitting in the sukkah. So it's still making the bracha before he continued to perform the mitzvah as he's sitting in the sukkah. And he continues to perform the mitzvah of Leishi Basukah. So as a result of that, even if you reminded yourself after you started eating, and even if you're not going to continue to eat, you finished your meal, even then, since you're going to continue to be in the sukkah, so in other words, suppose though you finished and you're about to walk out of the sukkah and you say, oh yeah, I forgot to make a bracha Leishi Basukah. If you're leaving the sukkah, you can't make a bracha then. But if you're still sitting in the sukkah and you're spending some time there, then although you finished eating, you can still continue to make the bracha of Leishi Basukah. What about somebody that's leaving? A person, let's learn another halacha. A person who's going to spend several hours in the sukkah. He goes into the sukkah and he's going to eat there. He's going to spend time with his friends, have a conversation, and spend a couple of hours in the sukkah. Shoya b'sukkah mahalach kama shoyis. He's going to spend several hours in the sukkah. Ayafilu kama yomim. He's going to be in the sukkah now for a couple of days. And he eats his seudah or his different meals that he's going to eat in the sukkah. Even if he steps out of the sukkah, but he's walked into the sukkah and he made a bracha, and he's going to spend a couple of days there even, and even if he in between, on occasion, steps out of the sukkah to return shortly. Taka returns. He doesn't have to make another bracha each time he comes back for. He was there for breakfast and he sat for a couple of hours. After breakfast, he learned for a couple of hours, and then it's time for lunch. So he continues to eat lunch. So he made a bracha on breakfast, Leishi Basukah. He doesn't have to make another bracha of Leishi Basukah when he begins eating lunch. He can be yoitza with the bracha that he made in the first suda. However, let's hold up with the howevers. What if though, if after he eats breakfast, he's planning on spending a lot of time in the sukkah, a couple of hours. But after breakfast, he goes out and decides he's going to leave the sukkah now for an hour or two. So it's not just for a few minutes. He had breakfast and he has a little conversation with somebody and then decides, you know what, I have to leave for a couple of hours. What's that? Whatever, yeah. Right. Or even if it's a zman mu'et, it's not an hour or two, but it's a zman mu'et. He had a mind to be out for an hour or two, and then all of a sudden he decides, you know what, I want to go back in for another coffee. I was going to leave, and now I decided, I'd like to have another coffee. He comes back right away, but initially when he left, he didn't have in mind to return right away. He had in mind to spend quite a while. So then leaving, having in mind that he's going to spend an hour or two out of the sukkah, that type of leaving the sukkah establishes a hefsik. The yeshiva between his first bracha that he made when he sat in the sukkah for the first time for his breakfast or for his coffee before davening, to having returned after davening, or even having returned immediately afterwards. But he had a mind to leave for davening, and then he decides, you know what, I want another coffee. But he left initially having in mind he's coming back in an hour or two. So then, then if he was mafsik, he decided, mafsik means that he decides, I'm leaving the sukkah now, I'll be back in an hour or two. That's considered a hefsek. And I mentioned it earlier that the Rebbe talks about, there's a letter from the Rebbe where the Rebbe discusses the differences of what a hefsek is. There's a difference man for a hefsek for a suda. There's a difference man of a hefsek for davening in terms of a towel is falling off. A difference man for a hefsek for smelling. And there's a letter in the Rebbe, from the Rebbe in Chelik Dalet, if you want to take a look at the Sichos, where the Rebbe explains that each particular thing has as man as to what it would take normally, what it should take, not what it would take. What it should take for a davening is what it should take for davening. A suda is what this man for a suda should be. And the Rebbe, again, in the letter in Chelik Dalet, describes that and talks about it. So here we're talking about specifically for the meal, so he uses the expression an hour or two. For other things, there's different zmanim. Suppose a person sits down to eat and he makes a bracha and then he's called by his friend, hey, why don't you come into my sukkah? So he leaves his sukkah and goes to his neighbor's sukkah right next door, and he decides, let me spend some time with my neighbor. He leaves his sukkah. He just made a bracha in his sukkah, and now he's in his neighbor's sukkah. And he went from one to the other. He just made the bracha. Under these circumstances, tzarich levarich shuv leishiv basukkah. He made the bracha originally in his sukkah, and now he's going into his neighbor's sukkah, although it may have taken minimum time from one to the other. But still, tzarich levarich shuv leishiv basukkah. He has to make another bracha. Gam im sukkos chaveri nimtzas ba'isi chotzer shenivne b'yasukasi. Even if his friend's sukkah is in the same backyard. Nevertheless, the fact that it's a different sukkah requires him to make another bracha. Even if he had a mind, I'm going to start off in my sukkah, I'm going to make a bracha, and then I'm going to go to somebody else's sukkah. So even though under these circumstances, the bracha, which bracha helps? The bracha of hamoitzi that he makes, if he has in mind that he's going to continue to eat it in his friend's sukkah, he doesn't have to make hamoitzi again. But the bracha leishiv basukah, he does have to make again, because leishiv basukah is for this particular sukkah, and when he leaves this sukkah and goes into his friend's sukkah, in his friend's sukkah, he has to make another bracha leishiv basukah. It's things that seem quite obvious. Sometimes you need to learn the halacha to really assure ourselves that we're doing what we need to do.